and breakfast call dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
We are back again with our ABC dialogue. This time, of course, we are going to talk about budget 2015. Who is not talking about it? But instead of having one speaker, we have three speakers today. We have Firdaos Rosli. He's the senior analyst of ISIS Malaysia. Of course, we have our regular guest, Azrul Khalib.
Hi.
Sharing with his view on budget 2015. And we have our previous guest, Mike Smith, not his real name, the founder of 1337 Ventures and iTrain, just to chip in some entrepreneurs' perspective on the budget 2015. So, hi everyone.
Hello.
Yeah. So before we begin our discussion today, I would like you all to just give a brief just background description about what you do and what is your view on the upcoming budget, which will be tabled tomorrow. Just a brief one.
Hello everyone, my name is Firdaos Rosli. I'm the senior analyst in economics in ISIS Malaysia. Been in ISIS for the last 3 years, coming to 4 years now. I've obviously looked at various sectors of the economies, not just in a Malaysia's perspective, but also ASEAN and a little bit on the global side. And I work primarily on trade because I would probably say that is my stronger point of any of the section of the economy. And for the upcoming budget, as I said in various sessions before, I think it's going to be a very predictable one because, as we all know, the 2014 budget that was announced last year was also partly announced for 2015, which mostly about the GST.
And this is part of the 10th Malaysia plan.
Yeah, apparently it's the last lap.
Yeah, the next one, it will be the next Malaysia plan. Then it will be something new to begin with.
Exactly.
And Mike Smith. Oh yeah, Azrul Khalib first, perhaps.
Hi everyone. So I'm Azrul Khalib, and I'm what they call these days a social activist or
sociologist.
Cannot claim. People get upset now. But professional troublemaker and convener of Malaysians for Malaysia. And one of the things that we look for in a budget is always something. The buzz term is always what we say, what people-friendly budget, and every year it seems to be, of course it's going to be people-friendly, to some extent, but it would be great if today, perhaps in the discussion, we get an ISIS perspective. What do they mean when they say...
Not the terrorist group.
Not the terrorist group, no, certainly not.
But you can get both if you like.
No, we know what kind of budget will come up on that one, but what does it mean when they say things like people-friendly? But I'm also looking towards an understanding of how women fit into something like this budget. Very often we discuss about budgets, but it's more of a macro perspective, and we talk about communities, populations. But if we're talking about gender budgeting, when we're talking about specifically what kind of issues or items that we can expect that respond to the needs of women, it'd be good for us to have a discussion. So my point of view really is today in discussions hoping to flesh out some of these aspects of gender and a people-friendly budget, and also a little bit maybe about Sabah's Raw.
It's a wide range of topic to cover then.
Absolutely.
And Mike Smith, not the real name?
Well, I'm looking at it from a perspective of entrepreneurship. I know there's going to be a lot that's pushed on that front. Just want to see how low they go in the stack when they talk about entrepreneurship, not just focus on the tech guys, which is like a 0.1% of the nation, and something for grassroots level.
When you mention entrepreneurship, you're also lumping together the Ramly burger guy, and also the makcik selling goreng pisang on the roadside.
How are they going to help the true entrepreneurs in the country, which is like the lowest stack, and then help them get it up there? And while we're talking about funding, if the government really wants to play an involvement into the whole tax space, then get it right. Do funding from end to end. There's a huge gap of funding in terms of what we call the seed fund, the $500 to $1 million range. You can't just have one company called Cradle that gives out that stack itself. Are you going to help
Or
out?
Magic.
Yeah, I don't know if Magic's doing funding yet, but basically, what's the initiative for that itself? So that's the things that I'm looking for. And also the angel investor side, but they've been targeting individual investors, but a bulk of people are coming in from the corporate scene that wants to invest. So will the corporate angel tax incentive or something of that means come into place?
There's a wide range of issues that we can cover out of this budget, but for today, since we only have 45 minutes, we will cover mostly that affect the cost of living of Malaysians. And we will start our conversation today with the overall area of high cost of living, the umbrella issue here, and a lot of the issues, instruments that the government has put in place, especially for the upcoming budget, like GST and subsidy cuts, and also BRIM, and a few funding to enhance the private sector and corporations. It shows that the government want to reduce its debt and increase its revenue, and also to ensure that the people can cope with the high cost of living. But at the same time, I'm just wondering, like, with this high cost of living, such instruments like BRIM and all these other instruments of subsidy cut and imposition of GST next year, would it somehow be addressed, or would it be good enough?
I agree with you about the cost of living bit, because if you look at PM Najib's website, that is there's one part of the website that's solely focusing on the upcoming budget. They had a virtual voting, and virtual voting says that the number one priorities of the people is apparently, cost of living, and the third is the housing problem that most of the
and
urban.
The
second, I think it was the what was it? I think it was BRIM. Something related to subsidy, that was the top three items in the virtual voting. So with the cash handouts and all, we have this impression that cash handouts are bad. We also have this impression over the years, because since 2009 when PM took over, all the thing that was the thing that has always been on the media is about subsidy, and how devastating and inefficient it is to the public, especially in the Malaysian context. Yes, we spent a lot on subsidy. Back in 2009, we spent about 79 billion. That's probably the highest ever that we have spent on subsidy in the history of the country. So
why in the past we don't spend that much? But if I'm not mistaken, in the past, the price of oil was cheaper.
Oil
after
was
subsidy.
one of the contributor, but also population increase. As there will be more people in the country.
But
so
does it lump together corporate subsidy as well?
Corporate subsidy, yes. Partly.
Is corporate subsidy on the increase or on the decrease?
It depends on the item, but the one that struck the headlines the most was the oil price, the market price of oil, and gas subsidies and other subsidies like fishing and whatnot. But those are very minimum at the subsidy scale. So back in 2008, we saw that the price of oil skyrocketed to 2.7 ringgit per liter. And then we started to give out cash handouts, but it was quite an inefficient one, because it was through Post Malaysia, and then there were a lot of questions about whether this is a very targeted one. So the government, when PM Najib took over, he thought that there should be a revision on how we distribute subsidies, because subsidies are not bad. It's just that they are inefficient. The way we spend it are inefficient, because we cannot see the result of spending 1 ringgit of the taxpayers' money to the result on the budget.
So you mentioned that subsidy is inefficient. Azrul, I want to ask you, when it comes to a subsidy, do you think Malaysia should rely on subsidy forever, or is subsidy something that should be part of any government budget in any period, regardless is when we are in good economic times or bad economic times, or is it something that should be completely be taken out? And I'm referring to subsidies like, for example, oil subsidies, just to be part of the global economic market.
Well, I'm going to say something that's easy to think about on paper, but really when actual application, it's not, which is subsidies need to be population targeted, needs to be needs driven, and it needs to be something that takes into account, people's household income. If you're making less than X number of ringgit per month, basically meeting a threshold where subsidies will help. It's not something that you're driving a BMW and you're benefiting from subsidies, or you have very high income and your enjoyment of the subsidy is more than what the person who's driving a motorcycle or a Myvi would be able to benefit from the subsidy. Because right now what's happened is very much when you we're always focused on the oil subsidy, right? So we'll just look at the petrol part. And when you think about it, consumption is at the end of the day those who can afford to consume more. And you see those who have much more ability for access. If you subsidize on those items like fuel, then you're going to have those who of high income benefiting from the subsidy instead of the other way around. So we need to actually change this scale. We actually have to shift it in such a way that the guys living in Kampung Baru, in Lamban Pantai, in Kuantan, in Felda, are able to benefit from subsidies. But having said that, though, there is no. I think we're experimenting. There's no one formula that can fit all, and we need to be able to. I think the experimenter, as mentioned just now, with the post-Malaysia distribution of actual cash. Today, you have BRIM, which is dependent on you going through a process where income tax will look through, see whether you paid tax or not, or whether I think. But at the end of the day, you have to realize that who's paying tax, which is a very small population in the country, and then suddenly you're told that 80% of households in Malaysia actually qualify for BRIM, which means that perhaps 80% of households don't pay tax. Mm-hmm. So it's a situation where maybe the subsidies, the way we've been doing it for more than 30 years or something, needs to change. We're using formulas that were maybe back in the 70s which worked, but today we have a need to strategize. There's a larger population, but also our ability to ensure that subsidies help populations or communities in need is greater. We have the ability to do it, so why aren't we?
I want to ask Firdaos, because the government has been planning to remove the subsidy altogether, and there are news that's saying they're doing it bit by bit, so we kind of get used to it. Is it true that removing the subsidy is a sign of a healthy nation?
It's a very subjective question, and to answer that would probably be in a different context as well. But first of all, maybe I could add to what Azrul said just now. He pointed out very rightly about the externalities of subsidies. In the Malaysian context, however, there are three reasons why our subsidies are considered bad. Okay, one is inefficient. So it is seen as benefiting the rich but punishing the poor, where you see that from the subsidies that we distribute, only 30% are being used by the poor, consumed by the poor. So it's a very low compared to the rich, Secondly, it's a snowballing impact on the operating expenses of the country, where you see that as at today, 15% of what the country spend on its budget is solely on subsidies and subsidy alone, and then that's high.
40% of the budget is on subsidy.
15%, which is about which is.
But 15% is not a high number.
15% out of 262 billion.
Yeah. Okay.
And thirdly is that the way we distribute our subsidies are just way too broad. So this would lead to wastages, leakages, and smuggling. As you know that smuggling will take place in bordering countries.
And it's already happening in Sabah. As you know, the curfew until October 21st that we are experiencing right now in Sabah is because it's not so much on the terrorist group, but more on the smuggling that is happening between both countries.
Yes, exactly.
Especially fuel, on the area of fuel.
Yeah. So what we are trying to do, or what I think the government is trying to do, is to get as much from the people through taxation by broadening the tax base. Right now we have 1.7 million of Malaysians paying tax from the 13 million of the working population, from the 30 million of the population size. So it's a very, very small number. So we are trying to expand the tax base. So from there, the government is trying to collect as much as they can and distribute as much as they can as well. But it has to be, one, targeted, and two, discriminatory in the sense that we have to pinpoint who are eligible for what and by how much. I think that is what the government is trying to do.
So be very specific and detailed. That is also one of the areas that the government needs to do. Gowri, when it comes to high cost of living, I think both of us were sharing one of the news commentary last few days ago about one of the politicians saying that 2,500 ringgit as the basic salary, as the salary for fresh graduate is enough. But a lot of the young people, when we put it on Facebook, there were many comments. In fact, it was a really long thread. Young people saying that it's not enough. This is not a good amount of money for us to survive, especially in Kuala Lumpur. And you also have your own concern, right, Gowri, when it comes to high cost of living, especially among fresh graduates?
Yes, I do, especially since I just finished my degree and I'm still studying, I'm still a student. And to even rent a house itself, it costs a bomb these days. And it's definitely impossible to actually acquire a property. And resorting to taking to public transportation to save costs. But even to the news that we posted, there were a lot of mixed reactions. If you notice, a lot of older generation were actually okay with that. They said, hey, it's okay to struggle a little bit first. Why are you guys complaining?
They have this, we eat more salt than you sort of.
But the younger generation were the ones who were more outraged about it. Like, hey, what is this? Yeah. We deserve better than that. We're holding a degree.
No, everyone has their mom and pops.
Interestingly, we also have employers commenting saying, some of you are really not that good. 2005 is too much for you. So there's a lot of factors that go into this, and people are not sure these days how they want to go about doing it.
The reason why I raised this because if you look throughout the years, the level of salary has not been increasing as much. And this is not a Malaysian thing because it's happening all over the world, including our neighboring Singapore. The salary is in stagnant, but at the same time, the cost of living is getting higher and higher. And people are concerned with GST and subsidy cuts. Will it affect us? And my question is on BRIM. Will BRIM be a good solution, or do you guys also have doubts on BRIM? Like, should the kind of welfare help not just be in a package of handout, but more of a structural sort of welfare restructuring?
From my perspective, the 20 cents increase in fuel prices, for example, was linked back to the need to fuel cash handouts like BRIM. 20 cents is equal to 1.1 billion ringgit, which goes back to, the cash handouts that are being provided. Arguably, when you give cash, this is liquid. I think the financial term is fungible, and it's something that at the end of the day is able to be spent internally in the economy. It goes back. That means the money is dispersed. Then goes back because the person has to buy stuff.
Just now you say that how many percentage of Malaysian are qualified for?
80% of households. 80%. The threshold is 3,000 ringgit and below.
Because I don't know whether you read the recent news that the minister on the Prime Minister's department, Datuk Sri Abdul Wahid Omar, which was the former CEO of Maybank, he said that only 2 million families still earn below 3,000 ringgit.
Yeah, there is a serious debate going on right now as to whether the Malaysian government was overly generous, or it was as a result of miscalculation on who was supposed to be receiving BRIM. But until the figures come out and a proper examination of the effectiveness of BRIM as well as the handout, we won't really know the issue, because there's disparity that I think it was on 30% more, you know. And when you talk to the people who are receiving BRIM, it's like, oh, you dah dapat lah BRIM, or have you gotten BRIM? You dah minta BRIM. It seems like everybody around you is getting BRIM somehow, but of course that's not true. It's just a perception. But at the end of the day, it goes back to whether or not this is an efficient way to give out, to assist people. And from an economics perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, ISIS guy, you know, is that I know, is that, you know, the money goes back to the economy. So maybe from a certain perspective, there's no loss. But when you look at it from whether or not it's able to assist individual families, the single mother who's putting her 3 kids through school, the makcik who's selling curry puff, you know, all these things, you know, whether or not it actually helps them with dealing with things like increase in fuel prices, GST, sending kids to school, the rising cost of living, I don't think we've really examined the issue. We think just because we give 650 ringgit, and now it's going to be plus another 300 BRIM special, so it's going to be 950 for next year, right? It's going to be somehow or another we solve the problems of increase of the quality of living, the increase in costs and everything. You know, we think it's a magic solution, and we haven't put enough time in thinking what are the individual problems of individual families.
But what about...
Let me add a little bit on BRIM.
But before you answer it, I want to hear what Mike Smith would say regarding on the high cost of living. You are an employer yourself. And, you know, I am sure you know about BRIM and all that. Do you think that as an employer, 2,500 ringgit for fresh grad, and also the kind of salary stagnation that we are facing right now, is something to be concerned of?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, as an employer, we'll pay whatever they ask if they're qualified enough. So the whole idea is, if you want to ask for more pay, put your money where your mouth is, right? It shows your experience. So that's why we prefer, if students come to us and say that I'm worth more than 2005, show me what you've done to basically prove that.
The reason why I asked this, because the reason why there's BRIM in reality is because people are not making enough money to cover their daily expenses, that they need handouts, cash handouts.
I mean, that's the whole reason why the government wants to really push this entrepreneurship.
But it seems like a chicken and egg thing. Should the government impose like a salary restriction, either a maximum wage or a minimum wage, or should private sectors themselves increase the level of wages unanimously?
I mean, of course, the private sector has to do that, but right now it's more traditional businesses, right? Like 80% of the market is SMEs. These are traditional
old
guys.
money.
Old money. They're not going to pay you more than 2.5 for entry position, and that's a given.
So old money are the ones that control the salary scale of this country.
Definitely. So that's why if you have these new entrepreneurs that basically are born in the country, they go ahead and become heads of the company, CEOs. When they're going to employ people now, they're not going to pay them 2.5. They're going to pay them 4, 5, 6. They can basically do that. And that's what you see with the biggest startups right now. Look at MyTaxi. The team lead will get at least 5 to 9,000 ringgit itself, things like that. But that's the new generation of companies coming in. So don't expect this again to happen overnight. It's not a freaking magical solution. But just to throw something out there, I heard the Minister of Finance too basically mentioned that. How much of rebates, how much of the subsidies on petrol do you save if you get rid of it completely?
I think it's 21 billion.
Yeah, it's 21 billion.
So that means per month, that's 2 billion savings.
Yeah.
So imagine what you could do with $2 billion. All the issues about funding entrepreneurs. Every month, you could create a $2 billion seed fund to create bigger, better companies that's going to go ahead and hire people at $6,000-$7,000 worth of salaries itself. What you could do with that? You could build freaking 4 universities every month for one whole freaking year if you got rid of subsidies.
Yeah.
Of course, we're not going to do that. But just imagine if you just got rid of that simple thing of a petrol subsidy. Maybe not so simple. You're going to get slack for that. But the things you could do with it is insane.
No, but it goes precisely to this mindset, I think, with regards to subsidies. Subsidies are meant to help assist people. It's not entitlement. Today, what's happened is it's become a form of entitlement, that you are entitled, regardless of who you are or how much you make. You need to have subsidies. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make economic sense because it costs a lot of money for the country. So we need to rethink.
And you want to add something more about the BRIM?
Yeah, I think Azrul hit the nail on the head there. Okay, I need to hold the mic for the next 1 minute.
Okay, go ahead.
Disclaimer.
Okay. Disclaimer.
I see disclaimer.
I know.
Okay, the perception that we have about BRIM is completely wrong. Okay, in economics perspective, BRIM / cash handout / food coupons in high income countries, okay, are meant not to reward the unproductive, but to assist as a compensation to the unprivileged. So you cannot work and you cannot get as much income due to education, due to lack of skill, or due to your health.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so government have its duty as the government of the day to help them in order for these group of people to participate just like any other members of the society. That was the initial intention, and that should be the only intention of BRIM. Okay, but the problem we have is that when people who receive BRIM or BRIMified, if I could put it that way.
I like that word.
It's a verb.
It's a verb now. Apparently, go on Facebook, show on the cash that they've got, and then apparently, they think like how you rightly pointed it, an entitlement. It is not, and it should not be. So, how should the government address this later on? I leave it to them. But the problem has to be on the perception, and it has to come from the implementation, I think.
Mm-hmm. We will take a short break. When we return, more debate will coming up from all three of our guests here.
ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
We are back again
In our very lively studio today.
Yeah, just now off many discussion on the high cost of living and also the 2,500 ringgit salary for fresh grad. Is it really enough? But enough about salary, BRIM, and subsidy cuts. Focusing right now on GST. I think a lot of people until now they are not really sure about what the hell is GST, sorry. GST is not something that would affect just individuals but also companies, because companies are obliged to have GST as part of their accounts in their within their companies. So maybe we can start off with Firdaos, just a bit of brief sharing. What would the 2015 budget on GST will be about? Would it be just to tell the people that, hey, by next year we will have GST in April?
Okay, there are two perspectives of this. From the perspective of the government, it's all about increasing the tax base. Sorry, not increasing, broadening the tax base, whereby today we see taxpayers are mostly salaried or corporations. Less so on others. But with the GST, everyone will have to pay. Everyone will have to contribute as part of their lifestyle in Malaysia. You got to spend. You got to consume, whether it's services or goods. So you got to spend. So that is from the government's perspective, okay, broadening the tax base. But from the consumer's perspective, it's more of a price increase. It's more of additional tax burden that they have to face prior to post GST. First of all, it's not an additional tax that we are putting in the system. It's a replacement tax.
But a lot of people see it as an additional because the way it is being taxed is different from the normal sales tax.
Exactly. In the current SST, sales and services tax system, it's what we call a positive list system, whereby everything is exempted unless if it's specified in the list, in the SST list. It's completely the opposite with the GST, whereby everything is included except for the one in the list.
The subsidized ones.
There are two parts of this. One is the what they call an exempted rated items and goods and services, whereby consumers do not have to pay GST, but the supplier or the manufacturer will have to pay on your behalf as a consumer.
Who will then pass on those costs on to you as the consumer?
Well, there are many instances where this come into the perception that the cost will be the 6% will be embedded into the price, but at the end of the day, you can see how much you're paying as compared to before, because you don't know whether you're paying 15 or you're paying 5 or you're paying 10. So that is one. The second one is zero rated tax, whereby you don't have to pay as a consumer, and manufacturers or service suppliers do not have to pay as well. So the government will just exempt it in total. So the exempt lists are both lists are currently being debated / finalized by the government. I think in the upcoming budget they will probably finalize those two lists, but I might have a reservation on how much are they going to put in the lists, because the more you put in, the more you go against the idea of introducing the GST, which is to broaden the tax. Because if the list is lengthy, then you would see that a lot of people will not be able to pay tax because you are either whether it's zero rated or exempted.
Are you saying that the more you put on the list, the less people will consume?
Consumption will remain. You will still use petrol, still use electricity, etc., etc. But my point of view is that if the goods and services list is lengthy, so you don't have to pay. Somebody else will be paying it for you, whether it's the supplier or the government. But I would probably, in my opinion, as a young economist, if I can call it that, maybe government could collect, make the list as not as comprehensive. It's as little as possible as they could possibly can. But you'd redistribute it later, whether through BRIM or through food coupons, but not through having an exemption for the GST.
But what are the factors that they take into consideration when they are trying to segregate what goes into the list or what doesn't?
Your voice, basically, people like you. You put commentary in the newspaper, you put on the blogs. The ministry is monitoring this. They, from what I understand,
So they are monitoring us now.
Well,
we can only hope, actually.
Yeah, we can only hope. Not monitoring that way. I think they are just trying to monitor the voice and just to get the feel of what the people are feeling as a result of it, of the GST. But I think it's.
Can I ask something? GST is expected to raise at 6%. That's a firm thing, right?
That's a
6%,
firm thing,
right?
yes.
22 billion, right? You look at our budget this year; it was 260.
262. Last year was 262.
262 billion, and it was a deficit budget, right? And we didn't have enough revenue to cover what we had budgeted for, and then we had a supplementary bill this year on top of what we had already agreed on. So my question is, at 22 billion, and with income tax revenues, tax revenues, I think around 60 billion last year, we still don't have enough to cover what budget we've allocated, but at the same time, one thing that has been glaringly missing from the conversation, and if you're smiling, you probably know what it is the huge wastage, that exists from spending whatever that has been allocated. It's like we're spending money, yet we're asking for more revenue for expansion of the income tax base, simply because majority of people don't pay tax. I mean, I think the people are asking, why is it our fault that we end up having to pay for excesses of government when they don't buck up and explain to us why they don't address this issue of wastage, yet they're trying to get more money out of us. That's a burning question that's out there, and it still hasn't been answered properly.
That is a very right question, and I am so glad that you pointed it out. Okay, here's the thing, okay? First of all, let me correct the perception. In the history of Malaysia, I think only a maximum of 5 years that we have a budget surplus. In the history of Malaysia.
That 5 years was which
I
period was
believe
that?
it was between the late 80s to the early 90s.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between that. Because
during the economic, it was during Mahathir's industrialization.
Yes, because
periods.
it was actually as a result of the policies that we introduced in the 70s, not so much on the 80s, because in the 70s we
So the new economic policy really affected
yes
the surplus of
the new
80s.
economic policy was two-pronged. Okay, one was to increase the what was the word that they use to
Reduce the gap?
not to reduce the gap, but to encourage participation of races, of all races, to eliminate having an economy based on race. Secondly, is to reduce poverty. But this poverty reduction policy was so powerful that you see a migration of people from the kampongs to the city, just like you and me. Your parents, your grandparents were not from KL, mostly, I suppose, including my family, myself. They were, in the case of my family, they were from Johor, but as a result of, opening up of markets, new businesses, they moved to Kuala Lumpur, and here I am, as a beneficiary of such policy, but not the first prong, but the second prong, the poverty reduction prong. So that was in the 80s. So you see that during the late 80s to the early 90s, we had a budget surplus.
That one was during Tun Razak's period. Am I correct?
Tun Hussein On.
Tun Hussein On.
Tun Hussein
Okay.
On, because they introduced MIDA, the investment agency. They extended the government machinery in the kampong through Felda, Mardi.
So Hussein On was the second prong of the NEP.
NEP was two-pronged at the same time, but it was introduced by Tun Razak. But the one that
really
pushed
forward,
it was
really implement it
in the 70s.
Okay.
So that was the budget surplus thing. The reason why we have been always in the negative territory, or in the deficit territory, is because we are a developing nation.
Yeah.
And then we developed so rapid that the government spent and get value out of that expenditure. But unfortunately, we were a bit complacent in a way that we sat on our
Laurels.
prosperity, if I could put it that way, and we did not reform as much in the 90s and 2000s. So what we are experiencing now is actually a fast forward button that the government would definitely have to push. Otherwise, we will stuck here and for quite a long time.
Interesting information. We have very few minutes, but I just want to get opinion from Mike Smith regarding on the GST, because you have your own company. Have you set up any GST instruments within your company?
Yeah, we're forced to be GST complacent because of the turnover. But I mean, the education sector from the iTrain side, that's not GST taxable, right?
Actually, every area are GST taxable.
Yeah, so
from upstream to downstream.
So am I expected to say that if I have a flat rate for, let's say, we teach iPhone programming for 2005, now I'm going to take a part of that and give it to the government on top of that for my taxes and not push it to my customers? Am I nice enough to do that? No. I'm going to increase my prices, right? And I think everyone's going to do that. So you're going to see a sort of like inflation because of that.
So a lot of companies right now are worried because it will affect their businesses anyhow. I mean, you have like really cheap China-made products or services, and then you have like quality Malaysian-made or foreign-made services and products. Then with the price increase, of course, people are forced to choose the inferior ones.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes there's no choice. Like, if you want to learn something, you're going to come to us regardless, right? So don't expect to ask for a discount because, I'm limited to what we can do. What sales guys can basically stretch their margins right now, right?
So my question is, are we ready for GST if even companies are not confident about this?
Honestly, it doesn't matter. Like it or not, we're entering the next year. GST is going to be implemented. It's going to be a bitter pill that we're going to have to swallow. And then 2 years from now, for all you know, there's no debate anymore. We're living with it, And what's going to happen is more of a free market sort of dynamic, I think. What will happen is that the market will sort itself out. People will figure it out. It'll be more competitive to some extent. Perhaps at the end of the day, the consumers are going to get more bang out their buck because of the competition. So maybe at the end of the day, they will be benefiting from it. But there is pain. And when it comes to inflation, especially if we talk about, consumables that people depend on for their daily necessities, then those are serious issues that the government cannot take lightly. But GST, I think it's here. It's going to be here to stay. We're going to have to live with it.
That has been the core of Najib's economic policy, Najib's transformation program. If you see, he has been very keen to sign all this trade liberalization with ASEAN and other foreign countries, and he's been keen to liberalize Malaysia's domestic market, even at the extent of Bumiputra rights. So I'm just wondering, with the GST, how would the future of Malaysia be starting from next year? Would it be a high inflation where the government needs to tackle the inflation like how we experienced last time during Mahathir's time, or what would it be?
Come GST 2015, it's pretty much anybody's guess, like what you said. For all you know, maybe after 2 years' time, nobody's going to talk about this because we actually living it, But I would see that the GST would probably transform Malaysia into something that we have never seen before. Because now, instead of being overly dependent on the government, we're going to be overly dependent on how we maneuver through the economy. So instead, if previously, if you want to go for cheap stuff, you know a certain place that you can find these things. But when come GST, maybe you see that the price differential from one place to another will not be as glaring. So maybe as consumers, we'll probably find ways to circumvent this through the IT, for example. We have maybe someone will create like a Groupon like for consumable items or something.
Or an app.
Or an app, for that matter. Like
There might be another Uber coming up.
Yeah. So we consumers / people will strive through economy, and history has shown that. Yeah. It's just that, now government will probably have to take the bitter pill and to rebalance or recorrect what that to the trajectory that we're supposed to be on. I think.
Yeah. You have anything to add on? Yeah. So that's all for our discussion today. Thanks everyone for sharing your view. It is really a heated discussion. I wish we have more time to discuss all the different issues and the different areas of the budget 2015. But all the best to Najib Razak, for our Prime Minister, for tomorrow's tabling of the budget 2015 in the Parliament. That's all from us. This is Arlene.
This is Gowri.
And we are signing off. Bye.